Well, it started in the last week or so down in the capital, Juba, but it seems to have been spreading throughout the country. You saw over the weekend in this area of Bor where there was intense fighting and they had to evacuate those Americans, and also in some of the oil-producing areas. And the numbers have been relatively small, about 500 so far. That's not a large number, but now that you're hearing about these mass graves, there's a concern here that it's a much bigger problem than people realize, and they're worried about this full-blown civil war, and that's why just moments ago the United Nations Security Council voted to almost double its peacekeeping operation from about 6,700 to about 12,000. There's a growing international concern.
And just quickly on Americans, what's the status of Americans there? Most have gotten out, right?
Most have gotten out. They've taken somewhere about 380 Americans. There are about 100 or so that are still working in the country, but that's why those Marines have moved from Spain to Djibouti to be at the ready to take them out, because after Benghazi, the attack on the consulate, this is the new normal, having an emergency force ready.
And the humanitarian crisis could be just mind-blowing.
Well, you have about 80,000 people displaced right now. Half of those are in UN camps. They need food, they need water. The UN's trying to bring in supplies right now, but there's also a concern that it could be, refugees could be spreading to other countries such as Uganda, Kenya, and it become a regional crisis. We have a looming humanitarian disaster.
So you have the humanitarian side, and then of course you always have a national security risk. It is the continent of Africa. How much of a security risk is it, particularly when you talk about Al-Qaeda?
Well, there's always a concern, particularly, there's been a growth of Al-Qaeda in Africa. And also when you have lawlessness, when you have chaos, there's always a fertile ground, perhaps, for Al-Qaeda to spread. We've seen that in Syria right now. I don't think that's the big concern right now. I think the big concern is that these ethnic tensions are bubbling over, and we're seeing, the kind of disasters that we saw in Darfur. You think years back about Rwanda. That's the concern, that they relatively keep it contained now. That's why you have a UN envoy on the ground trying to mediate this, bring these parties to the table.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to ask you. So hopefully he will be successful.
He seems to be having some success in coaxing them to the table. So we have to see what happens over the next few days.
Thanks, Elise. We know you'll stay on it. Appreciate it.